Stories are important. The world doesn't need writers. No, that's a nice question. Stories gave people, felt myself when I was young. During a very troubled time in my youth, I escaped into fantasy stories, which is probably why I write fantasy these days. And speaking to what Robert Grace was saying, had the opportunity to go away to somewhere better, to somewhere where the hero does win, to somewhere where you can feel safe, or things are more beautiful, or whatever the case may be. When I am not inspired to write, I write anyways. When I'm really inspired to write, I write anyways. My kids would be the first one, lately, anyways. I started a new story that is a fantasy story, but for a much younger audience. I typically write adult fantasy, where it's swords and sorcery and lots of blood, lots of sex, lots of all the things that adults love to do in high adventure stories. And lately I started doing this kids book, and it's a story that I told orally to my children as they're going to sleep. And it was literally just something where I was like, okay, so today Gruffy the Griffin is going blah, 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 blah. And I would just make it up as I would go along, and it had no intricate plot, and it had no, I just, whatever came to my mind, I threw it out there. And they loved it, and they want me to write it down, so I've been trying to write it down for about a year and a half now, and I can't get into the main character because it's all from his perspective, and it just seemed really boring. Well, recently I added my daughter to be the perspective character, and the story has just flown along since then. So I take inspiration lately from her. Other inspirations to write, I listen to a lot of pop chanteuses, chanteuse being the French word for female singer. And oftentimes I don't know, I've always loved the female voice, and the sort of divas that we hear on mainstream pop just really kind of put me in a mood to write the kind of stories that I write. So that's definitely a source of inspiration. One that was carefully guarded when I cared more about what people thought of me, and I wanted to be cool, and you can't listen to Britney Spears and be cool, right? I don't care so much anymore. So
you listen to Britney Spears now.
Anyways, I wouldn't put her at the top of the pop chanteuse list. But mostly, I love to write. I mean, I love the idea of creating something larger than life, creating a character that can do more than I could ever do, or do what I do, but 10 times better. I don't think I ever wanted to change the world with my writing. I just wanted to write stories that people got excited about and helped them, perhaps like I was helped when I was 14, 15, 16. But initially, getting into it, it was I wanted to make a hero that I wanted to watch do cool things more than the heroes that I was reading about in books, or more than the heroes that I was seeing in movies. I wanted it to be my hero, the one that would do the things that I wanted him to do, as opposed to, every story you have has somebody that you identify with, and then at some point, inevitably, one time or 100 times, they do something where you're like, oh, don't do that, And I wanted to create the character that would come to that cusp and go, yeah, do that. Which, interestingly, the more that I've gotten into craft, I've realized that that's probably a way to make the character more boring. You need to have them do those things where the reader is like, oh, don't do that.
Anything that is not like real life. I like to read and write to get away from real life. Real life for me is depressing. Write at random times during the day. I always try to bring I wrote classic with the pen and paper, actually pencil because I make so many mistakes, but I can't write my thoughts straight onto the computer. It just doesn't work for me. So I usually sit down on the couch, sit somewhere comfy, and just write. Sometimes I do a little brainstorming, world building first to get myself in the mood of the story I'm writing, and then
always have something nearby to write on. And so whether it's a little notebook where I write little ideas and get pieces of inspiration for when I'm at work, or just out in the town or doing whatever. But I've also gotten this fabulous just roll of paper that I like to write with colors, and that to me helps give me a little bit of, helps the creative juices going a little bit to have colors. Some of the things that I have, I'll have maps and things in pencils, and my timeline in pencils, things that I know will easily change. But I like to have things where I can just write out my ideas, and as I'm trying to, this is especially for if I'm trying to figure stuff out and just get a few things going. And so as I'm trying to kind of make some of the world fit together, and then helps me understand how my world is actually going to work overall. And then of course, you have all of the things that I've been printing off from my computer of little quotes, stories parts of it that I've been writing. One of the things that I find really gives me a lot of inspiration is just being interested in everything and writing down. So learning about political science and theory, one of the things is one of my characters is an emperor, and the main foe is an emperor. And I wasn't quite sure how I wanted him to act as a character and how I wanted to make him. And then I went to the Terracotta Warrior exhibit where I was living at the time, and I saw this great quote where it talked about one of the historians at the time talked about how the first emperor of China didn't understand that the power necessary to take a country and to keep it were one and the same, or that they weren't one and the same. And so I was like, that's how I want my emperor to be. And so he's, in a lot of ways, he's modeled after the first emperor of China. And so I think seeing a lot of those things and looking at other sources for inspiration as well helps me understand my story a little bit better. For me, the hardest part is just to actually start writing in the morning when I'm getting down and to type at my computer. A lot of times my mind is going so many different ways and I'm trying to think of the story over and over again. But once I just sit down and just start writing, then it starts flowing.